now I am under a different name. So it's not just I have the problem connection, it's just that I want you to see a different office in the Politecnico. I'm just kidding, of course. Okay, so now let's move to the next speaker of today. Last but not least is Dr. Laura Pyrak Nolte. Laura is a professor of physics and astronomy in the College of Science at Purdue University. By the way, I think that now it's more or less 6 a.m. Laura time, so I thank Laura very, very much for being with us so early. So Laura, she's the president of Interpor, the International Society for Porous Media, and she's the current vice president of North America of the International Society of Rock Mechanics and Rock Engineering. Laura's interests include experimental and theoretical seismic wave propagation, laboratory rock mechanics, microfluidics, particle swarm, and fluid flow through material. My understanding is that also she has currently been elected last year as fellow from the American Geophysical Union. So congratulations. And Laura, now the floor is all for you.
Okay, thank you. And you can see my slides, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure before I start. Well, thank you. And I thank the organizers for inviting me here to speak on behalf of the International Society for Porous Media on the role of porous media and the security for society. I'm going to first just start by giving a little background on Interpor and their missions and goals, and then what do we define as a porous medium, and then a few examples of how being able to understand the structure and processes that affect porous media play a role in different security aspects for society. So let's start with an introduction to Interpor. So Interpor is an acronym for the International Society of Porous Media, which was established in 2008 as a nonprofit scientific organization for porous media research practitioners who come from academia, industry, and government and span a diverse range of disciplines. Our mission is to provide a platform to bring together researchers and practitioners who are studying, developing, and even manufacturing complex porous media to exchange information on science and technology developments. To do this, we have national groups. We have currently 16 national groups. 4 of these were formed recently and 4 are under formation, and these include Austria, Canada, Sweden, Saudi Arabia, and Greece. And the way that we help foster this exchange of information is through our annual meetings. We hold the annual meeting at different locations around the world in order to facilitate different scientists from different countries to be able to attend. This year, we held it online as a virtual meeting for the first time. And next year, it will be some form of virtual, maybe hybrid meeting in Edinburgh. In 2022, it will be in Qingdao, China. And then it comes to the US in 2023 at one of our national labs. If you'd like any additional information on porous media and the other platforms that we have for exchanging information, feel free to drop me an email or use the website that's in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. So what do we refer to as a porous medium? Well, the simplest definition is that it's some medium that has interstices, which means voids, holes, or cracks. And these voids or holes can be connected or they can be isolated. A few examples I'm showing here range from textiles. How do we weave materials and fabrics for clothing and other products where they need to be breathable? There's applications related to vision, which are contact lenses, which have holes on the order of nanometers. Our bodies are vast networks of capillary and vascular structure that transport different fluids to different parts of the body. And then you can see that the pore shapes in some natural materials, such as in eggshells and wood, are very different. The one in eggshells almost look like a fibrous material. And then, of course, you have manufactured materials such as ceramic, which also has pores. Now, because all of these materials have pores, it means they can be easily altered or perturbed due to different processes, such as mechanical, chemical, thermal, biological, and hydrological. So what do I mean? Well, if you have a porous media and you put it under stress, you can change the pore geometry, which then can affect the flow. You have chemical processes which can erode out your porous medium, or it can clog it up with material that would maybe prevent the movement of material. And so porous media can be affected independently by any one of these physical or chemical processes, or sometimes they're coupled processes which alter your media. So how does porous media play a role in security? I'm going to give examples of the role of porous media in different aspects related to health, energy, food, and water security. And in some cases, you'll see that maybe what I've placed under food or water is also impacted by energy or also impacts health. So let's start with health. And as we've seen in many of the talks today, the big topic obviously is the pandemic. And what's interesting is that one of our first lines of defense against the spread of the disease is a mask. And what is the purpose of the mask? It's to prevent the exchange of the virus. Well, many of you might be familiar with the different types of masks that exist, which there's the N95, there's the medical mask, and then some people use the stylish gaiter. If we look at these in detail, what we find is they're complex porous media. We see that they're a collection of fibers which are distributed randomly to create very complex flow paths through the media. They can be single layered, multi-layered, and have a range of pore sizes. Down in the middle here, we're showing different scales of what they call aerosols. The virus is smaller than 1/10 of a micron, but it can also attach and travel on larger size aerosols, which we try to block by wearing these masks. And so our first line of protection depends on us being able to understand how particles are transported through this fibrous porous media, and also can you treat the porous media to help trap such particles. And so for the N95, it has the extra feature that it's designed to electrostatically attract the small particles to aid in the trapping. So other aspects of health security related to porous media, well, as I mentioned earlier, our bodies are porous media. One example that I'm showing here is the vascular tissue in the brain. How you transport blood flow through the brain affects your ability to get oxygen and glucose to different portions. There's porous media studies related to sensors. These design a porous network in order to take samples and see if you have certain viruses or to diagnose different diseases. There is health issues related to bones. 1.5 million bone fractures occur in elderly people in the US at a cost of $18 billion a year. And so being able to learn how to strengthen and transport the important nutrients to strengthen bones is an area of porous media research. And then one other example in terms of monitoring health, there's a move to have wearable devices. Well, wearable devices at some point will have to have some sort of textile layer or something that will be on the body. And again, you want to have something that's comfortable to wear and breathable for the person. So porous media plays a role in health security just in terms of the body, but as well as in monitoring and characterizing the state of health, and also designing barriers to prevent the transmission of disease. So next, I'll just give a few examples of porous media and energy security. The largest porous medium on Earth is the Earth itself. Whether you're producing conventional, unconventional, or renewable energy sources, we have to understand the structure of the porous media in the subsurface and how it's perturbed as we either pump fluids in or out. Because when you're pumping fluids in and out, you're changing the pressure of the fluids, which affects the stresses in the subsurface, and can lead to unintended consequences such as induced seismicity, which threatens the security of housing structures, buildings, and other facilities. In addition, when you're either producing different types of energy, you also have waste. If it's doing unconventionals, you have the wastewater fluid, which comes from the hydraulic fracturing, which has to be reinjected to the subsurface to isolate it. And you also have the storage of nuclear waste, also done in the subsurface. So in all of these cases, you have to interact with the porous media, maybe at multiple scales, from the type of canisters that you build to isolate the waste to the rock itself. And then finally, there's porous media in other aspects of energy, which hydrogen fuel cells has the fibrous porous media, and solid state batteries. And so one thing we see is that there's some commonality. Here we're looking at the fibrous gas diffusion layer in a hydrogen fuel cell. We saw that we had a fibrous, different type of fiber in the medical mask, and we also saw that fibrous structure in the egg shell. So one important aspect of Interpor and at our meetings is to bring people from these different communities where their pore structures might be the same, but their applications are different, to understand the computational approaches, imaging approaches, and experimental techniques to understand them. So next I'm going to move into aspects of porous media related to food. Obviously, agriculture is one, and I've put that under water. And so here I just talk about some aspects where understanding, again, the structure and how a porous media can be altered affects such issues such as food processing. And one nice example is potato chips, okay, which we know can maybe not so good for your health, but by studying it from a porous media aspect, companies were able to find ways of using less harmful fats and oils in order to crisp them while maintaining taste. Another aspect of food is that, at least in many countries, when you get food, it's sold in plastic containers. And as we know, plastics are bad for the environment. They're hard to degrade. They're showing up inside the food chain. And so there's push on to use more natural material in the food industry, such as this example of using a certain type of leaf in order to construct plates. But in order to do that, you have to understand the pore structure, how it deforms, and how it seals to different liquids. Another example is you can take the waste from food products in order to develop materials for other industries. For one example is chitin, which comes from the shells of crab and shrimp, and they can reconstitute it into these fibrous microspheres, which then serve as a platform for platinum, which is used in catalytic reactions and also for storage and for storing energy. You have other issues, the porous media, how you store different foods and liquids in it, ultimately can affect the quality of their taste and the lifetime of how long you can store it. So these are just a few examples of porous media in food and related to food waste that have been worked on recently. And then the last topic is water, and we heard a lot about water today. And one of the important aspects, in addition to water scarcity, is clean water. And here is where porous media plays a significant role, because to try to clean water, we use different pore structures in order to filter out different particle sizes. And so this is a nice graph from Lee et al. 2016, which shows the size of the particles, and the units in here is microns, and the different scales of filtration that you need. So if you're just trying to filter out sort of grit and maybe pollen, you're on the order of hundreds of microns and you just use particle filtration. Where now if you start going down 2 to 3 orders of magnitude on the 1 micron scale, you have bacteria, you need microfiltration. For viruses now, we're getting submicron on the nanoscale. And then even smaller when you have endotoxins and metals. And so clean water is a security issue. And so there's different types of filtration processes. A lot of research has been done traditionally on ceramic filters. People are developing filters from graphene. In this case, it's selecting out oils to trap them in the filter. Other research has been done on using nanoparticles called nanorust, which take and attract arsenic out of water. And then there's been some recent research on using wood to desalinate water. So one idea is to take seawater, take out the salt, and make it drinkable. But people are looking for processes that use cheap materials, don't require a lot of energy, and can be used around the world with local materials. So in addition to clean water, in terms of water security, obviously water plays a big role in agriculture. The plant itself, you can view as a porous media and how it uptakes fluids and nutrients into the system, but you have to recognize that the plant is sitting in the second porous medium, which is the soil. Research is being done on how the root structure and how it forms affects not only how it takes up water from the soil, but it can compact the soil, shutting down the flow paths, which would bring rainwater down in order to provide fluids for the plants. And so when you think about porous media, usually it's not just one, but you have an interconnection between them. And then you end up with these coupled processes where one is affecting the flow paths in another. And then finally, as we heard in the earlier talk, a mention of groundwater depletion. As they show on the map, there's lots of areas around the world which are experiencing drought, and they're depleting their aquifers. And what happens then is you end up with what's called subsidence, sinkage of the earth. And here's just a map from Jakarta, a region where you had 1/4 meter to 4 meters of the surface subsiding. And so this is obviously a water security issue, but it can also impact energy security. The black lines on this map that you're looking at are a natural gas pipeline. What they've measured that due to some drought, they had subsidence up to 1/3 of a meter. So you can imagine that this pipe network now, the security of it, the ability to transport your gas securely and safety, is being affected by a groundwater issue, which is related to changes in the porous media over time. So thank you for your attention. I hope you have sort of a takeaway of what we mean by porous media and how the pores can be perturbed by physical and chemical processes. When we're talking about security, porous media impact water, energy, food, and health security, and their response can be linked and interconnected through different porous media. And hopefully, another takeaway method is that if you're working on porous media related to these energy issues, we'd love to come hear about your work at the International Society of Porous Media, where there are scientists and engineers looking to understand the structure and the behavior of porous media in order to engineer solutions related to societal security. So thank you.